and welcome to the 13th episode of Guts, Glory and Story with Alok and Sangram. We've had fabulous, enriching conversations with engaging speakers for the last 12 weeks. We had Umesh last time, and Umesh humored us with wit, humor, and all his wisdom as a doyen of Indian advertising. And here we are exploring a sector with whom I worked very closely as an agency. I run a strategy and a marketing consulting firm, and it has been one of the sectors that we served very closely. One sector that has not seen innovation for a long time, and we're going to hear some innovative ideas from the speaker that we have today. But yeah, formal introductions later. For those of us who still don't know us after 12 weeks, I'm Sangram Surve. I'm an ad man. I am a brand guy, a storyteller, filmmaker. And with me is my dear friend, Alok Sinha. Alok is an author. Alok has been a serial CEO. Alok is also an investor. And his book, Achieving Successful Business Outcomes, published by Taylor & Francis, is out in the market. Personal take is one of the best takes on strategy to understand these troubled times. So those of you who haven't checked it out, do check it out. I think it's available on Amazon. The lay of the day, we will be throwing questions at Prabhat, our usual, trying to decode COVID and the future of this industry, especially in the domain that Prabhat is. But after our questions are done, we have some really engaging questions that have come from audiences. Prabhat will take a stab at those. And if you have any live questions, instigated, inspired by our conversations, please do throw them. We'll be more than happy to answer them. Yeah. But to formally Prabhat, Alok and Prabhat go a long way. They work together. That job is going to be done by my co-host, Alok Sinha. Alok, all yours.
Thank you, Sangram. So for the 13th time, and that's a lucky 13 for us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And please welcome Prabhat Tiwary. He's got a long lineup. Sloan Fellow at the Stanford Business School, founder and CEO of a PropTech company, YourOurROOM. And Prabhat is a close friend of mine, and he and I, we were colleagues at Exchanging Corporation. When he chose to veer away from the beaten corporate path to begin a startup many years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting our power speaker for today, speaking on the tech-led future of residential real estate, Prabhat Tiwary. Prabhat, first of all, welcome to Guts, Glory and Story.
Thank you so much, Alok. Thanks, Sangram. And it's my privilege, to be part of this particular forum. I've been very, very actively following the last 13 sessions or 12 sessions. And I'm so glad, I have a chance to share my ideas and views with all of you.
Thank you, Prabhat. So first things first, Prabhat. You were in a very great job. And I know that because you and I, we were working together. You had a great run. How did the entrepreneur bug get you, and why did you choose to go down the path of a prop tech startup? Prabhat.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I've been looking at things over the last 25 years. And in the last 25 years, what I've noticed is that the city infrastructure hasn't really changed. The traffic state hasn't changed, nor have the living conditions changed. In fact, it has gone from bad to worse. And I was reflecting back, based on my stint in the US, as well as some of the travel that I've been doing during my corporate job. And I just kept observing that throughout, from the time I started my career till very recently. And there were two very distinct things that really stood out. On one hand, there were a lot of young folks working for various banks, IT companies, multinationals, and they were struggling to stay, to wait their journey through the city. They were spending 2 hours, 3 hours on traffic. They were staying in accommodations or homes which were, compromised to a very large extent. On the other hand, what was very, interesting, when there were so many friends, who had homes in India, there were friends who were living outside. They were all struggling to manage their property. They were keeping the properties locked. So somewhere I was just not able to fathom this, the larger problem that existed, which is on one hand, you have a lot of people struggling to have decent places, and on the other hand, you have a lot of these empty homes. And this is where I felt that maybe this is something which I should be solving. Now, real estate as a sector has something that has always fascinated me. And if I were to put things in perspective, by 2025, which is say 5 years from now, India's 13% of India's GDP is going to be real estate. 75 million jobs is going to be in real estate. So this entire sector has always been very fascinating. And from a timing perspective, I just felt that I'd had an interesting run with my corporate career. Working in the US initially had taught me technology very well. It had helped me develop an appreciation for technology, and then my career with exchanging as well as with HP and some of the other firms taught me how to run organizations, how to run P&L. And at Stanford, the only thing which really, one of the big things that I had really picked up was I want to do something on my own at some point of time. And I just felt this was the right time. And I want to do something with a larger cause, larger purpose, and create a legacy. And this is when I said, let me solve this particular problem.
And what an interesting time, Prabhat, because I think COVID is changing the whole world. But I think one of the sectors where it is actually changing stuff, and one of the sectors most badly hit has been real estate, right? And so
Absolutely.
many micro trends that we see, micro or even mega trends that we see as far as real estate is concerned. I think commercial real estate has suffered the most. Residential, from whatever traction I'm seeing amongst our clients, people are slowly starting, those who can afford, of course, and who've not been hit by COVID, are wanting larger homes because they're trying to accommodate that office inside the home because no one's sure when they'll be going to office next. And thirdly, like even we were discussing just before this call, there's this whole conversation that's happening off late amongst city planners about the 15-minute city.
Yeah.
A call to cut down on the commute, a call to essentially build active travel, which is walk to office, cycle to office, develop infrastructure so that people stay in close-knit community and clamp down on commuting. How do all of these trends bode for real estate? I mean, you kind of partly answered that question, but let's just draw a line from here to the post-COVID world.
No, sure. So if you really look at it from a consumer perspective for a minute, I think first and foremost, the real big demand is coming from what I would call migrant millennials. These are folks who are moving from tier two, tier three cities to tier one cities. And of course, COVID has disturbed some of that setup. But fundamentally, it is coming from this sector or this demography. And the other large demography are essentially nuclear families because people have realized that today, for an individual to be successful professionally and personally, it is important to have the right home, work from home, friendly home, safe home, secure home, close to their office so that people are able to commute within 10, 15 minutes and so on. So basically, the demand is being fueled from these two demography. The need for better homes has just gone up significantly. In the past, home was just a place where you just retire, but now people have realized it's much, much more. And the need for good homes has gone up. Now, what is good? I think this is what is getting redefined. And what we are hearing from the market when we talk to folks on the ground is people want safer homes, people want compact homes, people want homes where they can sit and work, they want homes where there can also be some degree of socializing and so on. And this is where people are not, they don't mind paying a premium. As far as COVID is concerned, yes, there are people who have left bigger cities. They've gone to their, hometowns. But to me, I think some of these things will settle down in the next few months. Already we are seeing trends where people are coming back. But the new equilibrium would be maybe 50, 60, 70% of them will come back. The rest of them may decide not to come back. And in a matter of a few months, you will also have new set of people graduating from colleges, getting into the workforce, and so on. And the third thing which we are also seeing very closely is this entire thing about ownership. We've already seen this, let's say, in the automobile world where people initially wanted to own a car, then they said, let's rent a car, and then they don't mind sharing a car. We are seeing the same phenomenon play in the real estate world where people don't, not everybody wants to buy a house, especially the younger folks, right? People, especially the millennials, they don't want to buy homes. They're very comfortable renting places because of the economics, etc. But what they really want is, a place which is convenient. They have more flexibility, and they are not blocking too much of their capital resources. And last, I think there's a very interesting phenomenon. The folks are now with COVID. People are also demanding better adoption of technology. So they are forcing real estate or residential real estate organizations to get into, get into adopting technology, so that there is a transparency in the way homes are being looked for. There's transparency in the rental payments, the agreement process, and the physical interactions between various folks as well as tenants. This comes down drastically. So these are the 5 or 6 different things which we are seeing at this point of time on the ground.
And I think, like you mentioned earlier, just to complete that one point, before I think we go on to Alok's question as well, is in the spirit of the 15-minute city, I think the whole aspect of renting a place closer to your office gains a lot more significance, right? Because while you can wait for a long time for infrastructure to actually catch up, one of the simplest ways in which you can contribute to the 15-minute city is actually take your home closer to the office, especially for the younger folks. So I think your own room will have a bigger role to play in terms of encouraging this trend.
You're absolutely spot on. In fact, the one thing that I've learned in the last 4.5 years is that there's only one factor that decides whether you're happy or you're unhappy, and it's how much time you spend on the road. So, it just comes down to that in the most simplistic manner. So I think the new trend, of course, is that, you stay close to where you work, because from one end to the other end, it could be a commute of maybe 1.5 hours in a city like Bangalore. In a Pune, it could be maybe an hour. In a city like Bombay or Delhi, it could be maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So practically, it's always better to stay close to wherever you're working within reasonable time. And I think the 15-minute, I think, is a fantastic, yardstick. And I was having a very interesting conversation with one of the founders of a co-working company. And we were just chatting and we were saying, how do we solve this problem together? So, and he made a very interesting statement. There's just two things. Either you get your office close to your home, or you get your home close to your office. There's nothing else you can do. If you want to wait for the entire public transport to change, etc., that's going to take some time. Unlike, in Europe and US, or even for that matter, Singapore, etc., that we're talking about, the MRTs are so advanced. In India, I think there's a lot of catch up, and it's a matter of a few years before that happens. So I think you can beat the system by co-working and co-living probably.
So Prabhat, yes, and I'm trying to link what you've said so far. So it seems to be a disorder, but with a huge propensity to fall into order. So you said there are, on one side, you've got excess supply of residential property. On the other side, you have millennials who don't want to buy property. And on the third side, you want the properties to be unlocked for millennials or people to be inside it closer to homes. But yet it doesn't happen. And taking it off from there, Prabhat, I think COVID has only accentuated the problem more, right? There were systemic problems in the real estate sector. So if we could request you, what are the challenges that you see in the short and the long term, bubbling, especially in the residential real estate industry? And since you are an expert on the co-living and the family home, especially if you direct your answer towards that. And you also said something else. I mean, the economy is going to see a large footprint of the real estate, right, in the years to come. So what is the effect, or what is affecting the economy today, and how do you see it opening up? So both the pieces, if I can rephrase, challenges, long-term, short-term, and how does it impact our economy? How do we see you driving the economy as a problem?
So, Alok, I think this is going to be a slightly, slightly longer answer than some of the questions.
Go ahead, take your time.
We are now getting into the heart of the problem. So, if you really look at the residential real estate just for a minute, right? The first biggest challenge that exists in the residential real estate space is there are 500,000 properties that are ready and unsold. And this is worth about close to $50 billion. And then there is another 1 million properties that are going through various stages of construction, which normally could be about 41 months. So if you were to combine the two and look at the inventory, the apartments, homes, etc., that's there either on the shelf or that's going to hit the shelf, we are talking about close to 1.5 million properties worth about 150 billion. Wow. Now look at this, 150 billion is 5% of India's GDP. So look at the sheer magnitude of the challenge that exists from a residential real estate. The second important fact which I want to bring out is that if you were to look at just cities, we are talking about roughly about 11 million vacant properties. So there are people who have bought homes, people who are paying EMIs, people who are depending on their rental income, for a livelihood. But then there are properties which are probably, lying empty or not being used. And third, very interesting challenge is in the past, people always made money on residential real estate by capital appreciation. So I would buy a property for 40, 50 lakhs and it would just appreciate to a crore or maybe 2 crores and so on. But today, if you look at it very closely, the capital appreciation has stopped to a certain extent. And we don't know the future, but I don't think it's going to appreciate very drastically, which basically means now the new economic return is capital appreciation plus the rental yield. And the focus is a lot on how do I get value from my existing rental yield. And you very rightly said that COVID is not the real issue because COVID has only accentuated, it has only precipitated the problem. And it has just, it has brought out some of the inherent challenges that existed in the past, out in the open. So I think net, if you were to really look at it, I think there are some deeper challenges that needs to be solved. And one fundamental mindset shift that is required is to move away from just looking at it as just physical assets, just buying assets, selling it. That I don't think that model is going to work. There has to be a layer that has to sit on top of it, which is about creating more value out of the existing residential real estate assets. And this is something we have seen in commercial, where you have plain vanilla offices, but on top of offices you have professionally managed offices. We've seen this in retail, where in the past we used to have very simple stores, but now you've got a full-blown experience center in the form of malls and so on. The same thing is also going to play out in the residential space, because that is when you will be able to take out the maximum, you will be able to unlock the maximum value. So I think these are some of the stuff which I can foresee, and I feel at this point of time the future is about how do you really solve all these distress in the residential real estate, and the solution at a very broad level is creating that service layer on top of these assets and ensuring a high degree of technology adoption, because real estate as a sector has lagged in terms of adoption of technology. Technology has only been limited to, let's say, creating a yellow page where you get everybody together and assume transactions will happen. Now it's about going far, far beyond that. It's about discovery. It's about creating a marketplace. It's about building full-blown ERPs, payment systems, integrations with various things, building intelligence on top of it, and so on.
So what you're saying, Prabhat, is COVID probably has brought players like you right in the center to solve the problem. Is that how we should be looking? Because the fact that there are empty apartments, people don't want to travel, that's what Sangram was saying. Now people are willing to, and if you apply that service layer at the top, you should be able to unlock value, which is very much necessary. But at the same time, since people are not traveling, it's good to the ecology, a lot of good things. And probably that's what is a positive outcome of COVID that I'm able to understand from what you're describing.
Alok, I think you hit the nail on its head. Definitely, COVID has brought things to the forefront, but I would underplay COVID just for a minute, because remember, it's a matter of time. Maybe in 6 months, in 12 months, people will forget COVID because vaccines are going to be out, immunity is is going to get developed, and so on. But even if you were to forget COVID for a minute, I think the larger systematic problem still exists, and the scale is massive. And by the way, just to give you a sense, if you look at the market size, we are talking about a $13.5 billion market of just residential real estate in urban India. I'm not even talking rural. And within that, if you look at the shared rental, which is more about co-living, etc., together, which is about 4.5 billion. So technically speaking, if you look at it, companies like us have an opportunity. And if you were to add the market share of all companies like us, and there are maybe 20, 30 companies with 5, 6 big ones, their combined market share is only 2.5%. So we've just cracked surface at this point of time. So there's far more to do, and I think I'm glad that we are the right we are the right place at the right
At
time.
the right time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So I'm going to, you know, ask my next question with a reference to Theodore Levitt, who basically talked of the concept of a core product and an augmented product, and how we can layer a product and essentially add value. And I think we saw that in commercial real estate with WeWork coming in, right? Who basically redefined the whole concept of space, and of course, and the whole range of co-working spaces later came in. And here's someone who came and said that it's not just about physical space, but it's about networking. It's about making life simpler. It's about creating an ecosystem. And suddenly, from a space, you were talking ecosystems, right? Uh, Something similar uh, could possibly happen in the rental residential market, which is catering to millennials, uh, by the addition of service layers, by the addition of technology layers, where even concepts like living together and the potential of networking with who you live together suddenly come to the fore. So at this juncture, I'd like to ask you, what are the service layers that your own room is adding in terms of technology and service? Do you see concepts which have already come in commercial real estate, concepts like co-living, concepts of ecosystem, concepts of, networking, all of it also coming in residential living spaces?
Yeah. See, I think this is happening, but it is happening in phases. The way I would look at this is the first basic need is people need a safe, secure work, home. I think location, safety, security was the primary thing. So people did not care, about the other services, but people said, "Can this come to me at an affordable price?" I think we have solved this by giving what we call managed homes. Now these are given to millennials, where the people, or single millennials who share it, or it's given even to smaller families. So there are different stages there. The next one is more about what I would call it a small community. Now, community, if you look at it, can be given in the form of five, six, seven people staying together in an apartment, in a house. So there's a small community that gets developed, which I think is very, very important when people come to newer cities. Because remember, they don't. There are many people who are, who singles, who do not have a family out here, for their social support, for their emotional support, and so many other things. I mean, during COVID times, it's even more important. People do rely on the support system. So the second one was creating that small community layer. Now, on top of that, there is also, various kinds of services, which are essentially your property management services or rental management service. Now, there are so many small, small things. For example, sometimes you have a plumbing issue, sometimes you have an electrical issue, you have a carpentry issue, you have a default with, fault with the appliances, and so on. So there are so many services that you start to layer. It is also very important for companies like us to make a choice. What is it that you want to get into, what you don't want to get into? For example, food. I mean, we made a very conscious decision that we don't want to get into this because we'll never be able to compete with a Swiggy or a Zomato, right? I mean, we just don't have those deep pockets. So it's a very important choice that we need to make, that, where in the entire value stack we are going to play. But remember, this is from a tenant perspective. Now just come back, look at it, because there are three actors involved in this. One is tenant, second is homeowner. Now, what a homeowner is asking for is a professional property and rental management. So they're like, you can rent it to singles, you can rent it to families, you can rent it to senior citizens. That's your choice. But I just want to make sure someone is taking care of my asset. My asset is safe, secure, so it's appreciating. I'm getting continuous cash flow, and I'm getting a decent rental yield. So then there is a second layer, which is, your entire homeowners, which are asking for different services. Now there are so many more services that you can, that they offer. For example, there are owners who come and say, listen, I just took a position of my property. Can you design it in such a way that it can be rented out? Or there's someone who says, I haven't done anything in the last 8 years in my property and it's all falling apart. Can you completely redo the whole thing? So there are so many various scenarios, and there are owners sitting in out, not, neither in the same city or maybe sometimes in some other city. The third actor or set of people are real estate funds and developers who have massive inventory at hand. So they've all built with certain assumptions. Now they've realized that the assumptions aren't correct, or assumptions have changed, and they need somebody who can operate the property for them and who can help them get better yields, etc. and so on. So, we have an operating partner opportunity. So I think, to me, you can stack it in different, ways, and you can look at these three different set of actors, who can be serviced in the entire value chain.
Interesting.
So, Prabhat, there is one question which has come from Robert King. Before I ask my question, what is the top layer that you're referring to, Prabhat? That's a question which he's asked for. I think this was referring to the service layer. I think that's what.
Yes, yes. No, so look at it like this. I think if you were to take a step back, you can visualize, empty houses and apartments which are probably at the asset layer. Now, you can have apartments, you can have houses, you can have small buildings, you can have large buildings, you can have multiple formats of the asset. Now, on top of this, you have a small, what you call a basic facility management that exists, which is typically provided by apartment complexes. Now, what we are operating is a layer above that, which essentially is technology-based services, which for an owner, it is a property management, rental management. For a tenant, it is a managed home. It could be a managed co-living home, or it could be a managed family home. So basically, these are the various bouquet of services that we offer to various, set of actors. And all this, to a very large extent, has a significant technology play. Because if you do not use technology, then you do it in a very conventional manner, in a very opaque manner. Technology gives you the option where people can see everything in a transparent way. A tenant can see his agreement, he can see details of who else is staying at the place, he can pay rentals, he can raise service requests, he can follow the tickets. Owner can see when they're getting their rentals, paid, their taxes, because remember, there's a TDS, there is a GST, etc. associated. Is that being taken care of? Are the properties getting audited? So the owner can see every 2 months or 3 months that the property has been audited. These are the various outcomes of the audit and so on. So it's about building full-blown transparency and providing these services using technology.
So you are the CBRE of residential.
Absolutely. So CBRE picks up the cherry, at the commercial side, and maybe even at the residential. But then the reality is that there is so much more than just a cherry. And I think we're just probably looking at the larger big chunk that exists.
Yeah, you said it's a very small percentage. Yeah. So Prabhat, going forward, I mean, if you look at what is happening today, and again, I know you told me don't focus on the COVID, but there is a definite trend. So there is a trend now that people don't want open homes, and there is a far more pronounced need for separation, especially in co-living as well as family co-living, because people are the whole day long they're in their rooms taking calls, and the family also. I mean, it's the same thing. Although separation is not because of COVID, but because of each one on their laptops, doing their work. And it is also more about smaller spaces which are being utilized and utilized well. So there's reuse of spaces. Right? So how do you see the future of this segment, and what's your own room vision in carving this out? I mean, how do you see this transition? How do you see this going forward? And what's your vision in transforming, in carving this?
So the first thing is, you're very right that people don't want crowded places, right? So people don't want accommodations that are dormitory kinds. So if you really look at it, this is actually a big opportunity for us, because the category of assets that we deal with are not typically the PG accommodations. These are not the low-end apartments, where you have people just stacked into rooms, etc. These are essentially apartments in the choices of the societies. These are fairly large, spacious, etc. So I think first and foremost, the asset class that you pick becomes very, very critical, and we are very particular about the asset that we pick. Now, the second thing which we see is that the people don't like to share with random people a room. So what happens is, one of the small tweaks which we did in our business model is, you can come with your partner and you can go with the partner, so that, in case you want to share a room, or you can take the room by yourself. So these are especially in the co-living homes. The third very important thing, which also needs to be kept in mind, is that people have realized that there is a fundamental mismatch in the demand supply when it comes to real estate. So demand is coming from singles, students, senior citizens, people with special needs, unmarried couples. So it's coming from a very different segment. This supply is more catered towards traditional families, father, mother, and two kids, kind of a setup. And this is where it's not matching. So what you will see is that the future is going to be demand-led supply as opposed to, supply just coming on its own. And the next big thing which we are beginning to see, which we have, it's being talked a lot about by any of the IPCs like JLL or CBREs or Analogs, is what we call alternate asset class. An alternate asset class is basically an executive hostel or an maybe a student hostel or anything of that nature, but that is very aesthetically done with with very strong design principles. And this is where the focus is a lot on segregation, space optimization, all the stuff that you spoke about, COVID, etc. So, and there what happens is because you're getting rid of common areas, in the same area now you can have more units, which means that your rental yield, which typically could have been 2% at the most, is now suddenly moving to 6% or 7%. So what we feel at this point of time is, A, we want to take full advantage of these new asset classes, and we are already working on plans. We already run small buildings like that. The second one is, we are also looking at both co-living as well as families and even newer categories. So that way it is not just restricted to only one demography type. We're looking at a slightly broader wherever we see. And third, I would say to a very large extent is, so many other services that can be offered in addition to the core rental and property management. So we're trying to build a full-blown ecosystem which sits on top of the assets to create maximum value.
And so Prabhat, when you say you allow massive diversity of tenant background, obviously you do a check, but massive diversity. So you talked about single mothers, you talked about same-sex couples, and have you faced problems? I mean, these are not normal things which you see on a date, but do you face problems and how do you deal with them?
See, the reality today is that we are living in an extremely, I would say, in a society where people tend to judge a lot, and we do come across various anomalies, or I wouldn't call it anomalies, but I would say cases where there's more
Bias.
complexity, right? And this is where we take conscious decisions. And I'll just pick one or two small examples. I do recall once that we had a very nice co-living home in one of these near one of the tech parks in Bangalore, and uh, and this was quite early, about 2 3 years ago. And one of the sales girls, she called me and said that, listen, we've got nice tenant. She works for a top technology company, which many of us use the cell phone of that company. Then and she's willing to pay the rent. Then I asked her, why are you calling me and discussing all this? Just go ahead and take the booking and close it. Then she said, sir, there's a small issue. She's got a child. She's a single mom. And then I said, then what is the issue? Then just discuss with the other flatmates, but they're not okay. So, you do come across situations like this, and then you need to decide what your moral compass is and what is the right thing that you want to do. And this is where we sat, we discussed, we said, we're going to stand with this lady. And we just got her the place. We explained, we just told the owner, because sometimes you just have to keep the owner informed, right? Because owner will, may interpret it in different ways. Owner might think that there's a family staying, or there are multiple families staying in a co-living home. So it's important to explain all this. But what we are seeing is that people trust us today when we are dealing with assets, and we are dealing with assets worth almost 200 crores between Bangalore and Pune. So owners trust us, and we just have to take the owner into confidence. And today, there are people who have so many social problems too. I mean, there are people who are rebuilding homes after job losses, people who are building their lives after a divorce, an ugly divorce or a breakup. So there are people with so many issues. But for us, they're just tenants, and it's important for us to be a little sensitive towards some of these things and do our bit, to improve the lives and make things better for our tenants. So this is, and same applies even to owners. We come across owners who are 70, 75, who have, for whom it's very difficult to even go and physically see their, properties. And they've given us like 7 apartments, 8 units, 10 units, and so on. So what we feel is that, in addition to taking a very business view of the whole thing, I think there's a larger social problem that we are also able to solve using this. And this is something that gives me more satisfaction, because I think we are able to create some impact than just make some money here and there.
As a matter of fact, I think I'm stretching on this conversation. We're going beyond our usual quota for 4 or 5 questions because I think topics getting a little interesting, and I think there's an opportunity to even position yourself in terms of promoting a certain kind of broad-mindedness amongst homeowners as well, in terms of opening up their minds, allowing a little diversity, and from that perspective also standing up for certain values. So I think that's I mean, as a marketer, I can tell you that's a very interesting positioning to take. I mean, in the sheer spirit of brand activism, picking up a cause of, introducing or
Absolutely.
standing up for more diversity, being broad-minded yourself, and then encouraging, counseling your homeowners to be a little more uh, broad-minded and more accepting of tenants, right?
Absolutely. No, and we've been very lucky, especially with the homeowners, because when we started off the company, we were at a point where we were trying to convince homeowners that why don't we give it to singles also, in addition to families, right? There was resistance, but over a period of time, what we realized is that most owners, they engage us for multiple years. They sign 3 year to 5 year contracts with us, and all these, after the first year, they say that we are happy with the way you're doing things as long as you follow the rules, you don't create any ruckus for any of the neighbors. They're more than happy, and this is where we are able to support them in whatever form. So, but the idea is also to be very transparent with them. In fact, Sangram, on that note, when we started the company, I had a very interesting conversation with Shikha Makan, who's a film director, and she had created a movie called Bachelor Girls. And this talks about the plight of single women in Bombay. How they get judged day in, day out, right? And these are all working, having some very demanding jobs, going through the struggle of traveling every day, etc. And some of the conversation that we had was exactly what we are talking at this point of time. And she was very, very happy when we told her what we are doing, etc. And some of these people do inspire us, to go and solve a larger social problem than just look at it as a business proposition.
Lovely.
Prabhat, on a lighter note, why are you not in Bombay in that case? Is that Soumya who's holding you back?
No, but that's the plan, Alok. We are looking at Hyderabad as the next city. We have almost zeroed in on Hyderabad, and post that, we are looking at places like Bombay. We are looking at Delhi, Chennai, etc. One very important thing here is that this needs to be staged, because if you do a big bang, it costs a lot of money, a lot of investment, etc. And there's a lot of learning. So we said, when we started, we said, let's first do something in South. So we did Bangalore. Then we said, let's do something in West. So we did Pune. It worked. Now we want to do a little bit more towards this side. So the idea is to go in a slightly staged manner,
Yeah.
than in a big bang manner.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one last question before I go to the audience question, and that's like one perennial real estate buyer's dilemma: to buy or to rent. You know, Wealth managers always advise nowadays, don't buy because rental yields are so low. You can just put that money in mutual funds and you could be very happy renting. On the other hand, the classical wisdom of saying mera ghar hota hai, so ultimately what to buy. So in the post-COVID world, where is the jury as far as you are concerned? I mean, would you advise? Obviously, the most obvious answer is to rent because you're in that business. But do you see that the case for renting will become ever more stronger and it will solve the problem of inventories as well? Or and what does that forebode for so much of inventory which also has a pressure to buy?
So I don't think I would be able to give you a very direct answer, because it depends on the context to a very large extent. And the context here is that if you're committed to a city, if you're committed to a location, right, if you have certainty about your job, etc., these factors, then it may be a good idea, to pick a decent place. But if you're going through, I would call it a flux, where you're trying to figure out your professional setup, you're moving jobs, you're going through personal transition, etc., then I think it becomes a very dangerous proposition. The second point is, it's okay to buy the first house, but I think this whole thing about buying house after the other, one after the other, etc., which I think used to be a trend in the past, I think this is getting questioned to a very large extent, because then you got to be very sure where you're buying. Will the property really appreciate or not? I think the biggest challenge or temptation which people need to avoid is going by the herd mentality, right? Where, there are like 10 of my friends who bought an apartment in that complex, so I should go and buy that property over there. I think today it needs to be very well thought through, and it has to be well researched, keeping the context in mind. So that's what I would say.
Sangram, should we switch on to some
Yeah,
of
I think let's
the...
move on to the audience questions. We've exceeded our quota by a wide margin.
Absolutely. It's such a fascinating conversation, Prabhat. We've never done this. We've gone far ahead of the quota which normally we have assigned. But great conversation. Go ahead, Sangram.
I think we have a question from Sandeep Singhal. He asked, managed accommodation provides more hygienic living conditions and a lot of convenience to users and a new asset class for investors. So do you see the possibility of creating REITs in the area, particularly in the Indian context?
I think Sandeep's got a very solid question, and my personal belief is the future is about REIT or REIT equivalents. And if you really look at it, there was this first REIT in India by Blackstone and Embassy Group, which was oversubscribed, which is doing extremely well. But then this was to basically manage commercial properties, commercial rental yielding assets. To me, I think what I always think very strongly is that whatever is happening in the commercial space, why will it not happen in the residential space? And this is a conversation I've had with some of these private equities as well as some of the IPCs. I feel the future is going to be companies getting into REIT kind of formats where people would start investing in large rental yielding assets, and this is something where we'd love to be part of those REITs, or joint ventures where you have developers, landowners, real estate funds, and an operator, everyone coming together to basically convert an empty building into high rental yielding building and so on. So I think that's a future for sure.
Okay. There is a question from Arvind. He's part of the innovation lab at WeWorks. He says, which trend, tech trend, within residential real estate will have the most horizontal impact across both residential and he says across residential, commercial, and industrial businesses, and why? I'm not sure what he means by horizontal impact, but probably the residential real estate, which will impact all three: residential, commercial, and industrial businesses, and why. Maybe that is the 15. Maybe the answer probably is the 15-minute, but I don't know. I couldn't get the full question.
But so Alok, let me just answer this slightly different in a slightly different way. So if you look at technology, I mean, let's understand how technology has been used in the residential real estate space. Technology started off in a very ancient manner, in the sense it was more about discovery service. Now it's about getting homeowners, it's about getting tenants, it's about getting an insurance company, it's about getting a bank, and putting everybody together in one big portal and so on. This is how it started about 10 to 15 years ago. To me, I think with Google, this becomes irrelevant, right? I mean, today I can Google and I can find the information. I think what has happened after that, the second phase, which actually companies have adopted, from a technology perspective, has been creating full-blown ERPs in the residential real estate space. Now, these ERPs today are either for you to manage, rentals. It's to manage your property. It's to manage your taxes related to the asset. It's to do with buying, selling. It's all transactions that you can do, with the asset. So it's like creating those full-blown ERPs, and that, to me, I think, is giving a lot of value to homeowners, to tenants, as well as to the developers. The third phase, which I think is currently going on, and we consider ourselves as companies that have been part of the second phase. We've built our own ERPs, where entire process has been automated. And remember, again, this further stretches to integrations with KYC systems, integrations with various kinds of payment systems, bank reconciliations, and so on. The next phase, from technology perspective is a lot about your AI and machine learning, etc., where people are able to take smart decisions based on risks that they see or opportunities that they see. I mean, should I give this asset to this kind of people at this particular price and so on? Those kind of smart decisions can be done. So I feel that the answer probably may not be as simple as I would like it to be, but I think it is going through its technology evolution. Real estate is a little bit, behind, but it's there. And then, of course, when it comes to at an asset level, there is so many more, technologies like, IoT, analytics, project management, etc. So I think technology is playing a very critical role across board.
Brilliant. I think we should lighten it up a bit, and I think one of our audience is actually doing that job for us. And we have a very interesting question from Archana Patni, and she says, uh, as one of your ancillary services, have you ever thought of matchmaking as well? You have a captive audience, after all. Real estate marries real people. Why not? Have you ever given that a thought?
We actually have the database, so it's not very difficult. And based on the tickets that we get from people, we also know the temperaments, so we can do a lot of all that. But to me, I think on a serious note, it's not very easy. It's not a very easy thing to do. I mean, but I think we certainly can work with various companies that can use this as a primary data and then work on this, provided people they sign up for this and so on. But I see no reasons why this cannot be done.
You should officially partner with Serendipity to take over because the platform is there. Beyond that, it's all good old Serendipity which will take over and facilitate that. To answer Archana your question, uh, Alok, you want to pick? We have some
I
very.
think Jatin has a subsequent question right under Archana's. And Prabhat, that goes, is the company looking for expansion into North where there's a huge unsold inventory market? Would it be good to see those being tried out? And he says one more piece. Any plans of tapping into nearby areas of colleges, university campuses to meet the student requirement? I remember you have not talked about student at all. So is that something which you are looking at, Prabhat?
Interesting niche actually.
Yeah.
So if you really look at it, there are multiple demographies that we typically need to be very clear on what we are focusing on. So what we have done is we made a conscious decision that we will focus on co-living homes, which are essentially shared homes, and family homes. So these are two conscious decisions which we took, and it's very important because the dynamics are different, your marketing approach is different, and so on. Now there are two others, for example, student housing and senior living. Senior living is also a big thing. Student housing, there are various companies that are already in student housing, and student housing comes with, it needs a lot of capital. So we've taken a conscious decision to stay away. And of course, handling student, comes with its own sort of challenges, right? Because you're dealing with, kids with different temperament and so on. And so we made a conscious decision to stay away from student housing for now. The next thing probably could be maybe senior living at some point of time, because we're seeing a lot of demand over there, and there are people who requires homes which are more senior citizen friendly. So this is just from a demography perspective. Now from a location perspective, what I think Jatin has a very strong point. Delhi NCR region has the maximum number of unsold inventory, maximum number of vacant properties, and the least rental yields, because it's massive, right? I mean, Delhi is not a city, it's a state, or even beyond that. So I think that's the plan. I think it's also to do with our expansion plans, because remember, these require funds. So as we go with our investment plans, etc., it's tied to that. But in a couple of years time, for sure, we see ourselves getting into NCR.
Lovely. I think we have a question from Wish Habani. The question is, what are some of the good books to get a good sense of the real estate market for someone who's just beginning to get a grasp of the industry per se? Any recommendation for a complete beginner?
So, I personally feel that the best way to learn about real estate is twofolds. One is you can read all these research reports by JLL, CBRE, and Arox. This is one way. And second is if you can just pick a few industry leaders, and my personal favorite, I mean, I have two people I really admire a lot. One is Anuj Puri, from Analogs, and second is Deepak Parekh. I mean, they give you a lot of insights, So sometimes, if you're a little bit lazy and you don't want to go through the whole report, you might just spend half an hour and just listen to them, and they are able to, distill insights from these reports, like, which I don't think anybody else could do. In fact, the other day I was sitting in a conference with, and I was just listening to some of these players. Deepak Parekh was there, Raheja, Hiranandani, all these people were there, and he was making some very interesting recommendations. He was saying that, uh, you know drop the prices if required by 10%, 15%, 20%, but get the unsold inventory. I mean, he was giving, and of course this is out in the public domain. So to me, I think this is where there is maximum, learning, if you really want to learn about it as a subject.
Interesting.
Prabhat, there's a question which I think uh, uh, tends towards helplessness, and I don't know whether any one of us will have any answers. But here is a question from Ankur Malik. He's a founder.
Yeah.
What are the best uses of idle commercial and residential real estate properties?
Well, see, I, I, a lot of my inspiration comes from companies like Uber and, of those, the companies of that type. And, what hurts me the most is when I see, things which are just idle, whether it's a vehicle which is, sitting idle, or, a a kitchen, let's say in a restaurant, and so on. So I feel at this point, people have to be more innovative about repurposing, assets. And I think, why should, for example, offices, why should offices be lying empty, for, maybe two-thirds of the day? I mean, only from 9 to 6, offices are full. After 6, there's nobody in the office. There's no reason, right? Especially when you're operating across time zones. It can be repurposed. I mean, it can be used for conference calls, it can be done for brainstorming sessions, and so on. Similarly, even with co-living spaces, there are a lot of common spaces which can be repurposed. So I think the need of the hour is to build efficiency and to increase the utilizations. Either co-working utilization, co-living utilization. In fact, there's a very interesting conversation I was having with my co-founder, and he was suggesting that, you have all these lobbies in five-star hotels. Why can't they be used as meeting rooms? You've got nice chairs, most of them are empty. There is water, there's coffee, just sit down, five people meet, just be quiet, do your meetings. So I think there is tremendous opportunity, to bring in efficiency across, various asset category. And I think the future is all about that to a very, very, very large extent.
I think very interesting answer, Prabhat, because in one of the latest Bloomsbury reports also, the same one which I discussed some time back about the 15-minute city, one of the interesting suggestions is what do we do with central business district that becomes ghost town in the evenings? You know, how can you develop infrastructure in a place like Nariman Point, which actually becomes like ghost town, or BKC, which actually becomes completely empty? Can we welcome social life over again and cross utilize some of these areas? So yeah, actually you're throwing light in some of the ways in which. But on a lighter note, I think if you have excess inventory, please get in touch with Prabhat. I mean, he's dealing with excess inventory. If
Exactly.
you have excess inventory, please get in touch with your own room and list your properties with them. He'll get you a customer, right?
It will be a pleasure to help.
Lovely. And I think we have one more question. Maybe we can squeeze one or two more. We have 5 minutes from Sanjay Pandey. And I think you may have mentioned that 30% of India's GDP is going to be real estate, right? His question is, what percentage of that is going to be rentals?
Um, so basically, what I said was 13, because that's
Oh,
about, yeah. Today, I think it is probably maybe 11, 12 in that range. The 13% would be in 2025 when it touches about 650 billion. Now, if you look at, this is the entire real estate. Now, the residential real estate is about close to 50, 60% of that. Right now, the exact number as far as rentals is concerned, it is hard. But just to give you the exact number today, the rental market is 13.5 billion. It's totally 20 billion, of which 13.5 is urban India and 6.5 is rural India. So it's about 1/5, 1/6 of that, larger number.
So maybe we can squeeze one more. Sangram, why don't you go ahead with the WeWorks question? I think that was something which.
Oh yeah, I think I've been a part of WeWork, and I think I was very fascinated by their We Live concept, which is all about co-living.
Yeah.
I'm sure being an industry player, co-living is something you toyed around with. And what are your thoughts on co-living as a concept? And do you think it has a future at all, given COVID times and so pressures for social isolation and isolated homes and social distancing? What are your thoughts on co-living?
See, I feel that co-living is going to stay for sure, right? Because if people don't co-live, then what is the option? What's the alternate option? The alternate option is that people go and live in PG accommodations, or people go and somehow manage and get an accommodation which could be substandard. So co-living is the future for sure, and I strongly believe. And just to give you put things in perspective, it's almost about close to $4.5 billion market, which is going to grow further. Now, if you look at WeLive, right, WeLive is nothing but a premium sector of co-living. So co-living again has various segments. There is one segment which is WeLive, which is like the premium segment. Right, we have properties which probably will match some of that to a certain extent, not too many, because then your price point goes to a different level. You need somebody paying a rental of at least 25,000-30,000 per month. Then there is the next level, and then there's a next level, and then there's an economic level, and so on. So there are various levels. And remember, we are talking about singles, who probably may be drawing a salary of anywhere between 3 lakhs to maybe 25 lakhs or 30 lakhs. So there are various, options available to them. And also don't forget that there's also white collared, and then after that, there's also blue collared set of people who will require accommodations. So to me, I think there is room for everyone to play, right? It's a choice which people, companies will have to pick. And WeWork being WeWork, and Embassy being, having the reputation, I think they basically also have this concept of maybe combining a little bit of WeLive, WeWork, and taking advantage of that. So to me, I think it's a great concept, and it will do very well in my view.
Yes, I think, and we're in a world where I think we live basis networks, and the best thing is to kind of serendipitously bump into someone from your field and your domain.
Yeah.
Imagine a community where advertising folks stay, or imagine a community where innovators are staying together, or IT folks are staying together. So there's a chance to matchmake for players like yours, where you bring about to the power of technology, to the power of social networking, people who are from the same domain, who share similar ideologies, similar domains, to actually come and stay together. Maybe that's the future that we're looking at. But you know, I think we're very close to calling it a day, and I think we've squeezed in many more questions than we usually do, Alok.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is not the standard format that we normally follow. So Prabhat, you have kept this conversation scintillating. So thanks again, Prabhat, for a very refreshing session, extremely. And I'm sure that our viewers walk away with many dimensions of the changing environment. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you again. And to our viewers, next Saturday, we spoke about it. We will speak to Akhil Gupta, the ex-chairman of Blackstone in India, and who, after earning in triple-digit millions of dollars, left an offer of $500 million to teach at Harvard to find happiness, or find the nuances of happiness. So that's there for the next week. Sangram?
And post that, I think we're looking at world-renowned photographer, conservationist Steve Winter. That's our season finale. Steve will be logging in from New York, 750,000 followers globally, huge figure on Instagram. And he'll be talking about conservation. We'll actually see his latest pictures, some of them which have never been published. I think we'll have them exclusive on our platform, some of the behind-the-scenes videos when he made his latest series of photographs on captive tigers in America. All of that on 5th of December. And of course, we will have announcements to make regarding our upcoming partnership with WeWork Labs for what we're bringing to startups. So a lot of action lined up. Thank you very much for tuning in on a Saturday evening, giving us your time. And all you folks, all you good folks, have a great weekend. And we shall see you again for yet another session of God's Glory and Story on the coming Saturday. Thank you, Prabhat. Thank you, Alok.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Prabhat, once again. And thank you to our viewers, too.
Thank you so much, Alok. Thanks, Sangram.
Bye-bye.